Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Tony, good to see you again. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And we are here, day one, almost wrapping up. I'm glad to be closing this session for the day. And I just love to circle a bit back, pun intended, to really seeing what's happening with SSX, or the Sustainability Solutions Exchange. We started with an introduction of the government's commitment and future commitments towards sustainability, as well as jumpstarting the conversation for the next 2 days for the food and lifestyle track. Now, coming back and really place setting us back to the present, we want to talk about the discussion on where we are currently now and how the next 2 days can be the roadmap towards our transition towards a circular economy. Now, the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020 has placed a tremendous strain on societies and economies around the world. In the Philippines, economic and healthcare systems that were unprepared to face a crisis at the scale and magnitude that was experienced were put under pressure. More than a year into the pandemic, the Philippine economy is slowly and steadily getting back on its feet. As the fog clears, amidst the rubble comes the realization that as we build back our socio-economic systems, no longer can we afford to do business as usual. An immense value has to be accorded now to measures that will protect our health and ensure that economic and social activities are not further disrupted. While strengthening resilience is an important part of building back better, there's also the urgent need to examine how socioeconomic activities are increasing the risk of both natural and man-made disruptive events occurring in the future. This has a lot to do with the way we consume and utilize our natural resources and the manner by which we design operations and production processes to protect our environment from degradation. Now, of course, now that we've talked about the circular economy model fits snugly into the Sustainable Development Framework, delivering environmental, economic, and social benefits. Governments and private sector players are encouraged to collaborate in creating enabling environments to promote the adoption of the circular economy and other green and low carbon approaches. In particular, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or as we call it, UNIDO, firmly believes in the critical role of the industry sector in advancing the circular economy and low carbon approaches. When adequately enabled, enterprises and other economic engines can help create green industries that shrink environmental footprint, while at the same time continuing to grow and deliver goods, services, and employment. In the next few panel discussions, at any point, if you have any questions for our panelists, we invite you to send your questions via the chat or Q&A section found at the right portion of your screens. And of course, later on in the live Q&A, we will try our best to accommodate your inquiries. So on to our first speaker. Our first speaker for this panel is Teddy Monroy, the country representative of UNIDO country office in the Philippines. As national program officers for UNIDO, since early 2018, Teddy assists in and contributes to portfolio development and management, as well as in attending to UN country team activities, particularly in the development of the updated socio-economic and peace-building framework between the United Nations and the government of the Philippines. He actively develops new technical cooperation projects with UNIDO's country programming framework on inclusive and sustainable industrial development for 2018 to 2023, a framework he also helped develop. Teddy is a chemical engineer with a master's in chemical engineering from De La Salle University. He also served as an assistant professor and researcher for more than 5 years. Let's all welcome Mr. Teddy Monroy. Teddy.
Good day to you all. I am Teddy Monroy, UNIDO country representative to the Philippines, and I am pleased to be speaking with you today. May I now request for my slides to be flashed on the screen? Thank you. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization is a strong supporter and partner of the Center for International Trade Expositions and missions of the Department of Trade and Industry. We have been witness to the efforts exerted by SITEM to mount this event, which has been derailed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that we are all here, UNIDO stands ready to provide the technical assistance to help ensure that the objectives of this event are achieved towards supporting Philippine enterprises, particularly on promoting circular economy as a way forward for Philippine economic engines adapting to the new business normal. Indeed, as the fog clears for the Philippine economy, amidst the rubble comes the realization that when we build back our socio-economic systems, no longer can we afford to do things business as usual. An immense value has to be accorded now to measures that will protect our health and ensure that economic and social activities are not further disrupted. As immediate examples, we expect that health and safety protocols will increasingly be instituted in work settings, while the evolving business landscape also sees the fast expanding digital space that can, at the same time, boost productivity, competitiveness, and resilience of supply chains to future shocks. While strengthening resilience is an important part of building back better, there is also the urgent need to examine how socioeconomic activities are increasing the risk of both natural and man-made disruptive events occurring in the future. This has a lot to do with the way we consume and utilize our natural resources and the manner by which we design operations and production processes to protect our environment from irreversible harm. Let us briefly look at some numbers. Next slide, please. In 2017, the global economy was valued at around 120 trillion US dollars, and in 2021, 136 trillion US dollars. However, the rise in global consumption levels over the last decades has also led to a drastic increase in resource depletion and record-breaking pollution levels, placing on the environment serious pressure that is well above its regenerative and assimilative capacities. Next slide, please. Our global consumption and production activities have so far considerably led to environmental pollution, climate change, health burden, and the destruction of species and habitats, as you can see on the screen. With this, it seems only prudent that recovery plans take into account principles around sustainable consumption and production, circular economy, and other greening approaches. Next slide, please. Circular economy is an economic model that proposes a sustainable manner by which resources are harnessed and by which products and services are produced. It deviates from the traditional linear economic model that is based on a take, make, consume, dispose pattern, thereby supporting the decoupling of economic growth from environmental degradation. As the circular economy model fits snugly into the sustainable development framework, delivering environmental, economic, and social benefits, both governments and private sector are encouraged to collaborate in creating enabling environments to promote the adoption of circular economy and other green and low carbon approaches. Next slide, please. Happy to share that in the Philippines, a sustainable consumption and production action plan strategic framework has already been developed to guide the country in its journey toward greater sustainability. The framework focuses on two outcomes: efficient and equitable use of resources by firms, households, and individuals, and internalization of economic, social, and environmental costs and benefits of production and consumption processes. Next slide, please. In parallel, like-minded private sector companies have also banded together under the United Nations Global Compact Network to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The Global Compact Network in the Philippines, with the assistance from UNIDO, has instituted a 10 in 10 business ambition that aims to support SME recovery and resilience building, highlighting therein the goal to pursue circularity principles as can be seen in the slide. Next slide, please. As the specialized agency of the United Nations mandated to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development, UNIDO firmly believes in the critical role of the industry sector in advancing the circular economy and low carbon approaches. When adequately enabled, enterprises and other economic engines can help create green industries that shrink environmental footprint while at the same time continuing to grow and deliver goods, services, and employment. Next slide, please. In promoting circular economy and green industries, UNIDO interventions are designed around resource efficiency and cleaner production applications such as chemical leasing, water stewardship, green chemistry, test methodology, renewable energy and industrial energy efficiency, and the development of eco-industrial parks. Next slide, please. UNIDO supports governments and private sector by capitalizing on the organization's global expertise and experience in providing, first, technical assistance through technology demonstration, systems improvement, tools and methodologies. Second, support through its normative function and standards and quality-related activities. Third, analytical research and policy advisory services. And finally, effective facilitation through convening and partnerships for knowledge transfer, networking, and industrial cooperation. Next slide, please. The slide on your screen provides some further information about UNIDO. Before I end, allow me at this point to thank my UNIDO colleague, Mr. Rene van Berkel, whom you will be hearing in a while. He is the Regional Director and representative of UNIDO in India and a global expert on circular economy. I look forward to hearing his discussions on the future of manufacturing and international trade. Next slide, please. Finally, we invite you to get in touch with us through the addresses on the screen. Thank you, and wishing you all a productive experience for the remaining of the event.
Thank you so much, Teddy, for that presentation. Later on, we'll have a Q&A together with Teddy and, of course, Rene. But as we move on to the program, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Rene. Sorry about that. Again, I just want to say again, our next speaker is Rene van Berkel, currently heads the regional office of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. He is accredited as UNIDO's representative for India, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Rene has over 33 years in professional experience in resource efficiency and cleaner production, industrial ecology, productivity, innovation, sustainability, and social responsibility, particularly in manufacturing and related sectors, including the required policies and capacities. From 2015 to 2017, Rene was the Chief Technical Advisor in UNIDO's Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Program in Indonesia. From 2008 to 2015, he was Unit Chief Cleaner and Sustainable Production at UNIDO headquarters in Vienna. Between 2006 and 2008, he was an independent consultant in eco-efficiency and industrial ecology. From 1999 to 2006, he was professor of cleaner production at Curtin University of Technology in Australia. And of course, from 1989 to 1999, he held various research and leadership positions at the University of Amsterdam. Dr. Van Berkel is a Dutch national and holds a PhD in environmental science for the University of Amsterdam. That's a mouthful, but definitely we're going to learn a lot from all the years that Rene has done for the environment and, of course, to our society. Let us all welcome Mr. Rene Van Berkel.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to contribute this afternoon and talk a bit about the green and circular economy, and then in the context of manufacturing and international trade in food and lifestyle sectors. So I'm Rene van Berkel. I represent the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And UNIDO is the organization that is in in charge of supporting inclusive and sustainable industrial development that is linked to Sustainable Development Goal 9, where we say we make sure that industrialization contribute to shared prosperity, environmental sustainability, and economic development. So we also say that factories that are fit for the future, because it's products that are sold in the market that are contributing to environmental sustainability, and that also create decent jobs. So there's a number of themes which we could then work on, and circular and low carbon economy that we talk about this afternoon is certainly apart from that, as well as also increasing global value chains and innovation and digitalization. So if we look at this SDG 9 and the industry index, then the Philippines actually ranks in the UNIDO classification on this SDG 9 industry index as 51st. And that is based on the value added per capita, employment, and technology. And if you compare to countries in the region, it's a bit below the other major manufacturing economies in ASEAN, but it's ahead of the South Asian group of countries. So 51st compares to Malaysia 18th, Thailand 23rd, and Indonesia 45th ranking. But the differences are relatively small. And if we go and talk about this environmental initiative, then the talk right now is very much about what we refer to as a triple planetary crisis. So it's that the interlinkages between climate change, the loss of biodiversity and nature, and then pollution by waste and air pollution add up to 3 self-inflicted planetary crises that are closely interconnected and put the well-being of the current and future generations at unacceptable risk. And what we are seeing, and that's clearly highlighted by this report from UNEP, is that the kind of piecemeal and uncoordinated action along these 3 domains of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution is then failing to make the transformative changes that are needed to achieve ultimately the sustainable development and goals and also protect our planet. And this notion of this triple planetary crisis, of course, also very much in the policy and market responses. On the left-hand side, you see the Paris Agreement that was that's now 6 years ago. But we see also new agreements coming into force. Like last month, the Global Plastic Pollution Agreement was signed. We see also that companies are referring back to standard to introduce voluntary sustainability standards. You see very many of those, though, and large international buyers are adopting some of these standards and will put a market pressure on suppliers also from the Philippines to comply with these or conform with these standards. And then, of course, we see also specific action being taken, like and particularly the European Union with the European Green Deal, which is really trying to have a transformation of the economy. And you might say that's far away, but they will also then look at border adjustment measures. So that's really then the CO2 tax. So things which are imported into the EU will be taxed on the basis of the amount of CO2 emissions that have taken place in manufacturing. So these concerns about this triple planetary crisis are really translating into policy and market drivers for sustainable consumption and production. And there I talk a little bit about this transformative change of production and consumption systems, because we can put the sustainable development goals in this way, as we have the natural resource base, and we have production and consumption systems, and then we have well-being. And we need to change this middle layer of production and consumption systems so that we address this interconnected nature of climate change, biodiversity loss, and air and water pollution. And then this is very much linked to the extraction processing of natural resource materials, metals, minerals, fossil fuels, which are contributing more than 50% to climate change and well 1/3 of global air pollution. So the extraction of materials is so central to addressing this triple planetary crisis, and that is then driving the change towards resource efficiency and circular economy. I've spoken already about materials consumption. Here's some data about materials consumption in the Philippines since 1990. You'll see there's about 10% reduction in per capita materials consumption. So that's the good way, but of course the population has increased, so total materials consumption has still increased. But you see that compared to other countries in the region, the per capita materials consumption in the Philippines remains relatively low compared to other middle and high income manufacturing economies in Asia. And we can also translate that into materials productivity. So that's expressed in dollars made, dollars of GDP per ton of material used, and that's done in 2010 dollars. And then you see that material productivity has really been quite significantly increased, and particularly since the last decade, I would say. the 30-year period from 1990. And also, if you look then comparatively among the Asian middle-income countries, and the Philippines is on the higher margins. It's not yet as high as in the high-income countries, but it's quite ahead of several of the other countries in the region. So there's already good work being done, but we still talk then about the green economy and the circular economy, and I think they are, to a certain extent, the two sides of a similar coin. If I go with Wikipedia, then the green economy is more aiming at reducing the environmental risk and ecological scarcity, so also contributing to sustainable development. And the circular economy is more emphasizing on the models of production and consumption, so looking at sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, and recycling of existing materials. But ultimately, they are both aiming to use less materials, less energy, less water for economic activities. So if we drill one step deeper than the circular economy, we see different definitions. There is definitions which are more driven by the environmental consideration, which are driven by or promoted by, for example, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And they say they look beyond the kind of the take, make, and dispose extractive industrial model, and to create something like take, make, and then use and recover industrial model. And that relies then on system-wide innovation that's then also underpinned by a transition to renewable energy. But if you look at some of the business groups, like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, they talk more about circular economy as a new way of looking at this relationship between markets, customers, and natural resources. So it looks more new business models. So we see something innovation in the type of how materials go through industrial systems, and then the business models that govern this. Many people have said that, well, circular is basically the 3R economy of reduce, reuse, and recycle, but I tend to disagree. We have seen the 6 R's, adding rethink, refuse, and repair, or even the 12 R's. But I guess what is really the issue is that circular is not a recycling economy. So in the circular economy, basically materials are designed to be recaptured and utilized, and so there would be no recycling needed ultimately in the circular economy. UNIDO has also put forward some definitions on circular economy, and it says that the circular economy is above all also an industrial economy, because it has to manufacture goods and services that are then returned to use several times along the value chain. So if you see on the lower end, you see material supply going to design, manufacturing, distribution, and use, and then end of first life, and then coming back in different loops there. So and that is all industrial processes, and this adopts on the principles that products are designed to last, and value is maintained, waste and pollution minimized, and that maximizing the use of renewable energies. We can go a little bit further on the base of work that the European Union has done, and some of our own work. And we can say that circular economy is first of all about innovation. So we talk about new products, new business models, new consumption patterns and lifestyles. So there's innovation that applies to different life cycle stages. So which materials that we use, how we design and develop products, and how we produce and distribute products, and how we use them, and how we dispose of them at the end of the life. And this innovation is then enabled by education and behavioral change, by public policy, and by changes in markets, like I referred to, for example, the Green Deal in Europe. But what is at the start of this is the thinking about circular strategies. And I will elaborate a little bit more in the next 5 minutes or so on these circular strategies, because I think these are resource circularity, resource efficiency, and resource switch. And I can put then the whole model together. So we have circular strategies that drive innovation in different life cycle stages and enabled by different components. That could be a comprehensive approach of a circular industrial economy. So these 3 strategies which I highlighted is that we first of all want to maximize the substitution of non-renewable resources, so materials which we extract from the earth and fossil fuels. We want to substitute that by renewables, so that's go renewables. Then we want to relentlessly practice efficiency, so the efficiency of use of all the resources, whether it's water, materials, or energy, so that we have ultimately less stuff left over to recycle or recover. And then recycle perpetually, so that we value all stuff that previously was concerned as a waste. So that's the resource circularity. So we give some examples. So the resource shift is very much to look at what's provided by nature. And we can look at what is resourced from nature. So we see, for example, also with the Philippines in the Textile Research Institute, a lot of work on alternative textile fiber. So rather than growing cotton, can we just use banana fiber, or can we use other leaves and so on for producing textile fibers? Or what could also be resourced from nature is the whole change to renewable energy. And you see here solar process heating and cooling at a pharmaceutical plant in India. Or we could also say at what's inspired by nature. So what are different industrial applications of, for example, enzymes, or can we replicate the advanced mixing which is happening in natural systems in chemical reactors, and then have chemical reactors like you see at the bottom there, which are very small but have a high reactivity and can replace large industrial vats. So this is the kind of the resource shift. Then we have the resource efficiency, and this is work that UNIDO has been doing for a long time on resource efficient and cleaner production. So we say we first have to improve the efficiency of use of materials, water, and energy. So use stuff more efficiently, and then we have less stuff left over to throw away. So that's waste minimization. And if we minimize waste, then we improve the occupation and community health and well-being. And if people are happier, then they will be more resource efficient. So we can translate this mechanism then into different approaches which can be practiced in enterprises. So we can talk about housekeeping with low-cost measures, changing the inputs, optimizing processes, modifying equipment, looking at alternative technologies, reuse inside, and also exchange between different companies. So this is kind of the different angles by which one can find resource efficient and clean production solutions for enterprises. So if I look just some examples from the work that I was involved in Indonesia, we look at the food sector. We had one sugar mill. There was some just a cooling tower installed and a vapor line juice heater. So you see energy conservation reduced by 7.6%, water conservation almost 4%, GHG emission reduction 4.8%, and invested 115,000, and annual savings 102,000. So it's a payback within 13 months or so. And then we had another fish and seafood processing unit where they basically did not invest much, but just improve the practices in maintenance, and who can access the cold storage and do first in, first out freezer management, and reuse some of the second washing water for initial washing. So you see impressive results there: energy conservation, almost 60%, water conservation, 38%, GHG emissions halved, invest basically nothing, and then the annual savings were already close to $100,000 for this company. Then we have the textile sector. So you see here a number of different companies listed here: spinning mill, integrated mill, garment factory, and garment laundry. And you see, and the annual cost savings are ranging essentially between $47,000 to almost over $1 million. And you see specific water consumption reduced, the energy consumption reduced. So companies that are embarking upon this thinking of resource efficiency and cleaner production are making good returns on investment. So then I come to the resource circularity, and that's very much a matter where there is innovation happening, and we see just some examples from textile. Maybe I take that. This is plastic bottles, spirit bottles being used, which are recycled into t-shirts, and every t-shirt has about 12 bottles. So this Eco Hike in India is already doing that, and some others as well. Then we have more advances, maybe the chemical recycling of viscose, which basically repulps the viscose garments and then makes renewed viscose available for new garments. Then we have alternatives, which is a mechanically regenerated denim. So you take old denim and basically clump it apart and then put it again into spinning and weaving, and then produce the new jeans or new denim out of this. And we can also put this a little bit on the water side. So this water efficient solution dyeing is basically injecting the dyes into the fiber, and then you get a reduction of water consumption by 80%, fewer chemicals and CO2 emission reductions, and longer lasting color as the fabrics that dye less. And then ultimately we have also the waterless CO2 dyeing, which is basically zero wastewater, using carbon dioxide as a mechanism to transfer the dyes onto the fabric. This is really a different technologies which are really innovative and transform towards a green and circular economy. Then the last one I show maybe is on all the garment washing, on the stone washing and bleaching that were happening. We can also do that now with lasers that make jeans look like vintage, and then you don't need water, you don't need chemicals, and don't have the wastewater. So there's many, and I think that's maybe where I would like to maybe highlight that that with using this lenses of circular and green economy is providing lenses for innovation, so we can do things different. And also, I believe that the circular and green economy can mean different things for different people, but we have to agree that it goes beyond recycling, and it needs to involve something on circularity of the physical products and value chains, and something around the economy, the business models that could create and retain value. It is not something that we do afterwards, but it's designed in and provide a lens for business and product and business innovation. And then I would say it's achieved through industrialization. So industrialization meaning standardization, scaling up of this resource switch, so using renewables, resource efficiency, so doing everything efficient and having less waste, and then ultimately closing perpetually materials and materials flows and waste flows, eliminating waste in that sense. So I will close here. Thank you very much. Over to the moderator. Thank you very much. Here's some connections on some materials that might be available from UNIDO. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rene. Thanks, Teddy, for the presentation. Let's bring you guys back up here. Let's talk. Let's do a real talk. If we're talking about solid waste management, usually the joke is, let's talk trash. But today we're going to talk about resource efficiency and sustainable production and consumption. So I guess we have a lot to cover, and hopefully, if it's okay with attendees, we could extend just a bit, because I think this is a really good conversation to really open up, or at least give us enough time to simmer our thoughts for the next day 2 and day 3, right? And I think we have two different perspectives here. For Rene coming from a global aspect, and then Teddy being based in the Philippines, we could sort of like create different lenses for this. But maybe we'd start with the real question of why should we care, right? Why are we doing this? Why is it super important? I know that that's a lot to take in, but the question is, what's pressuring us to transition to a circular economy?
Yeah, if I may start, I think the key pressure which I highlighted also in my contribution is that really the use of materials, the use of stuff is driving so much of environmental degradation, this triple planetary crisis of basically climate change. Climate change is very much related to how much material we use, and every time we use energy, and that's all related to that. It's also linked to the degradation of nature and biodiversity, because we take it out of the environment, and ultimately it's also accumulating the pollution into the environment, which is choking up our cities and our waterways. So that is the environmental perspective, but I try to highlight also, and sorry to be brief in the presentation, that there are many business opportunities associated with that. So we see new businesses coming up that are making their business around circular products or green products, so they have environmental goods and services as their main business value proposition. So that's recycling companies, that is resource recovery companies, that is renewable energy companies. But there's also a lot of money to be saved by companies by just using natural resources more efficiently, and that's the traditional area of resource efficiency. So I'd like to say that yes, of course, circularity is the key element of circular economy, but it's not the only thing. We don't need to think only in terms of closing the cycle, but we make it easier if we close the cycle, if we have less stuff that is going around, so that's the resource efficiency, or if we take stuff in that can potentially be recycled back into nature, like the renewable materials. So I think that to come back to your question, why should we do this? Yes, of course, we are under a triple planetary crisis, so we need to do something, and it's very obvious in the Philippines, in India, everywhere we go, we see for devastating impacts of climate change, impact on nature and pollution. And of course, it's also a good business opportunity, and for you as an investor, that should certainly appeal as well. So thank you, but maybe Teddy, you can add from the Philippines perspective.
Yes, no, Rene, thank you. I just wanted to round up what you just said and touch on, the triple planetary crisis. So indeed, as Rene has said, circular economy has triple benefits. So it in tantamount to saying that it makes operations more sustainable. So it makes industries and economic engines more sustainable and resilient, especially after we have experienced the COVID-19 crisis that we had. So there are economic benefits in circular economy, lowering transaction costs, lowering energy costs, for instance. There's, and of course, certainly environmental benefits from circular economy, which is quite evident. And finally, perhaps what is not clearly seen are the social benefits. You know, the jobs that are created and people who will be able to generate more income from the opportunities that are created by a circular economy approach. So just to round that up, especially in the Philippines, I think there's a lot of room to move in this direction. I mean, we have to look at other countries as models. No? So I think there's a long way to go for the Philippines, but we're getting there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Teddy. Thanks, Rene. And I guess this is a good segue to the conversation of, the Philippines. The statistic just came out that 2020, the Philippines actually reduced its total carbon emissions because of the pandemic. That's something not surprising, right? But usually we are at the receiving end of the issue of the triple planetary crisis or climate change crisis, right? And to some people, it's unfair. And I think when we sort of like take ourselves into the reality of it, the Philippines has always been identifiably circular, right? However, because of industrialization and what we're talking about, resource inefficiency and just the exploitation of certain parts of the supply chain, we get affected. I mean, the fact that every single year we get battered by over 20 typhoons, it's getting really, really hot now. Labor's in terms of prices are getting changed. But the good side of it, technology comes into play where we can actually do better within the economy, with the right policies, with the right ethics and whatnot. So I guess the question that I have for both of you right now is, when we're talking about jobs, right? What is considered as a green job and how do you define that?
Rene would go first, Rene.
Well, okay, we can do that. I think that in terms of the green jobs, the definitions are not always that very clear, but certainly there are very clear green jobs which are associated with people who are basically doing environmental goods and services. So that could be a waste management collector, that could be an installer of the solar panels, that could be basically also an energy efficiency auditor, which helps companies to do these things. But I guess that there is a broader level of green jobs which are in the traditional industrial sector, where you say it's higher productivity, and those are becoming more environmentally sound. And if you have higher productivity, that also reduces the environmental impact. So I believe that the definitions are a bit, maybe you could say there's deep green jobs which are really in the environmental goods and services, and there are many jobs which have green elements. And I think that in that sense, it's important that wherever you work, one should have an environmental consciousness, whether you're a waiter in a bar or in a restaurant, or whether you're an industrial operator, or whether you are managing a company. There should be some kind of an environmental mainstreaming in there, which is a greening of your job competencies, your job responsibilities.
Yeah, yes, and to add to what Rene said, indeed, there's a lot of definitions out there on green jobs. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, we do have a local version of green jobs, a definition, local definition of green jobs. And I think it can be found in the Green Jobs Act. Although I don't have it top of mind, so I cannot define it for you right now, but we can go and look at that document, and there's a definition there. To me, how I look at green jobs and how I try to identify them is quite simple. I just look at, industries and economic engines that operate in a green manner. The jobs that they create and generate, those are green jobs. So that's how I kind of try to simplify things. So I hope that I think is a good way to start. And then from there, let's look at the definition from the Green Jobs Act. There's a definition there. Thank you.
Thanks, Teddy. Thanks, Rene. That was a super technical but also complex question, right? Because by definition, it's the same thing with sustainability. Who actually defines sustainability and what is the accepted standard for it? And I think that's where circular economy really comes in. Is it really gives us a proper starting point? What are the principles? How do we make sure everyone's aligned through the SDGs? I think that's very, very important. Now, in terms of green jobs, I'd like to sort of like decouple those two words and say na it's all our jobs to actually green the whole world, right? And that's the reason why SSX is called Solutions Towards Growth. We're talking about consumers doing their part, and also producers with EPR to make sure we create this transformative change. So going to the next question, we're going to talk about this systemic issue. We talk about linear take, make, waste, buy, use, and then dispose, and then circular economy when we're talking about restorative and regenerative. This is the hard part, right? Rene talked about the 6 R's. The first one is always going to be refuse. So the real question here is, if I'm a consumer, where do I start? Is there pressure to buy new stuff, or is it just a reimagination of our lifestyle that could adjust towards the needs of society?
Yeah, Teddy, why don't you start now this time?
Right. Thank you, Rene, for the opportunity to go first. Yes, my view on that is that I think the consumers should be the ones driving circular economy, in my opinion, because if consumers start recognizing the value of products that are produced in such a manner that it is not wasteful, products or services that are delivered in a manner wherein it capitalizes on renewable energy or saves on energy, then industry will follow. No, industry will start producing goods and services that would meet the standards of the consuming or the public. So I think there's a lot of role, or a big role, for consumers to drive circular economy. So if just consumers will just simply try to support more the products that are green, or perhaps just to avoid the wasteful products like single-use plastics, that could be a start. So definitely, the consumers has a big role to play here. How about you, Rene? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that consumers have different roles or different functions, and in each of these functions, they can basically exercise the circular economy. So first of all, consumers, of course, buy, and they choose products or services, and there is a really important element of what you say, refuse, or I would say select the best about what's available and select only what you need. And that is the kind of conscious buying and purchasing. But once you have then stuff in your house or in your living environment, then decide how you use it. So that use also makes a huge difference in terms of circularity. So what's the set point of your air conditioning? How do you maintain your car, or for what do you use your car? So that's as a user in daily life, on what we do from morning till evening. And then as a third role, I see then you are also a disposer. So at the end of life, you throw things away and then make sure that it's properly source segregated, that things which are hazardous go back to appropriate treatment, that things which can be recycled can go back to recycling. Just don't throw everything out of the door and hope that somebody picks it up, but take conscious action. So I think there are different roles to take once you buy something, or in the way you use something, and in the way you throw things away once you don't need them anymore.
Right. And I guess when we're talking about using things that we might need now and probably down the line we might not need anymore, we're talking about value and utilization, right? How can we actually put it in our minds that when we create decisions, we think with our mindset of the circular economy principles? Now, I guess this is a good segue when it comes to the next 2 days, right? A lot of our attendees and MSMEs, especially the ones that want to be competitive for the next, for a global market, right? And this is sort of like a roadmap from, if you're an MSME going towards Manila FAME or IFEX, is what are the sustainable solutions that are available? And I think that's a tricky part, right? We're talking about food and lifestyle. There's a lot of things that you can really start. So I'll leave it to you guys to choose food and lifestyle, or if you want to do both. But what are the first, or at least like good starting points for their companies and organization to actually transition towards a better solution, right? It could, the usual culprit would be, from single-use plastics, we're going to use paper and whatnot. But I'm curious, from your point of view, what would be a good starting point for the ones that are still starting off, and whether that's like a business decision or just like a material type of decision?
Yeah, I think it goes across the sector, so it's not really different for lifestyle or food. But I think that the first point is to make efficient use of everything you have. So there is still a lot of inefficiencies which result in additional losses of materials, energy, and water, which are costing the enterprises and so on as well. And we have often heard now also in the context of the COVID recovery, well, don't worry about the environmental things. Let's recover first. But we see also, and particularly in India, but also South Asia, across the board there, that companies are saying, no, this is exactly the time that you should invest in resource efficiency measures. So because there's not little opportunity to grow your market, to grow your demand. So the business growth has to come out of being smarter in the way you operate your business, which means energy efficiency, resource efficiency. And there's many things that food processing, textiles, and lifestyle industries can do, looking at trying to get rid of water in their processes, trying to reduce the energy use. I think that is normally a very good starting point and it has immediate return on investment for the companies. I think if you then want to move forward, and then of course product design comes in. And I think for the food processing, one should start to look with, in first instance, at how much packaging is actually being used and what can be done to reduce this. And I think that many food products we see 3, 4, 5 layers of packaging. A good way might be, well, let's get rid of one of those, and what can still be achieved, or can we look at the composition of the different packaging elements, so to make them single material rather than multiple material, multi-layered. I think in terms of the design for packaging for the garments industry and textiles is not such a big issue. So there you would immediately come to more designing around the product design. So products that are more designed to last, that are more flexible, that can be more easily cared, so you can wash them at 30 degrees rather than 60 degrees, or don't need dry cleaning as opportunities, and so on. So they're more flexible, achievable. So those are some of the strategies. And of course, with the textiles and garments and lifestyle industries as a whole, you could also more profoundly look at what are alternative materials. So alternative materials, whether it's we covered plastics into polyester or organic cotton. So these are certainly some of the starting points where basically any company can navigate what is good, what makes sense for its own markets, for its own consumers that it targets.
For the Philippines, to be very specific, I agree, packaging, that's one of the low-hanging opportunities that we have to look at. No, I mean, I think our friend from the World Economic Forum also mentioned that. No, I mean, packaging, and Rene did explain a lot of it around that area. I also think the use of water will be another thing that another area that companies and enterprises, especially the SME, should be looking into, not to be wasteful in the use of water. And recycling, I think a lot of the challenges why people are not recycling is because they don't know how to or where to bring the materials that they want to be recycled. So for instance, old clothes, where do I bring them? Let's just talk about e-waste. Where do I bring my e-waste for recycling? So we need to get our act together in terms of enabling people to go into this kind of circular economy approaches such as recycling. Back to you, Carlo.
Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, Rene. And I guess this is a great just to close off. We just have 2 more questions, but outside of the conference, the goal of SSX is really to have sustainable solutions, right? There's an expo part of this event where you can see a lot of sustainable solutions, and of course, marketplace, at least companies that are already abiding towards sustainable green growth. And of course, at the end of the day, how do people always use sustainability or circularity now as a buzzword, right? And for me, when I think about on the investment side, the biggest decision for me when we invest, the first thing is this whole reality that the world is running out of natural resources. So if we can't renew or regenerate it, sooner or later there will be an imbalance, and it's already happening with the climate and also with the economies. And I guess this is a very important part that we have to attest, especially when SSX is trying to advocate and champion the conversation about circularity, and also conversation of making sure we veer away from greenwashing. Now we have certifying bodies here, certification and accreditation. That's very, very important to make sure that consumers and producers abide towards real green growth. So I guess that's the question I wanted to ask for both of you is how crucial is it, or how do we even identify if someone is saying is greenwashing our fellow consumers and attendees?
Yeah, I think this is a quite a complicated question, and I think normally one would try to see, well, we've seen claims where people are claiming, well, I don't use any substance X, Y, or Z, and then you look at a comparison, and then there's the substance X, Y, and Z has not been used for 25 years by any in the industry sector. So that would be clear examples of greenwash, that you claim something which is basically not a differentiating factor. I think that would be very much one of the classical examples. I think that we consumers should be aware and basically look at independently verifiable claims, which are some of the voluntary sustainability standards. They have improved a lot over the last 10, 15 years. So if you can see that there is an environmental claim which is supported by a green label or associated with that, then you can have a certain level of trust in this, that this has been done. Because I can also understand, as a consumer, you don't have the opportunity to dig deep and really explore what companies have done from an environmental perspective.
Just to add, for the Philippines, I think there's room for us to improve our right to information. So I think products and services that are offered to consumers, it has to be clear, on what's in there, what's, things that are going to be very relevant in this aspect. So there's still room for that. So I think, right to information would be something that we can look into to, strengthen empower the consumers, as you have said. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Rene. At our last question is, we've talked about value, utilization, transformative change, triple planetary crisis. Now we're talking about greenwashing and then accountability. I think accountability is such a good way to close off our session, especially for day one, is who is accountable? Everyone that spoke and everyone that's here, we're all accountable towards reaching the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. What if we don't make it, right? And I think that's a scary thing to think about, but usually at the brink of the world going to extinction or completely unlivable situations, we actually find our ways to make it work. And I don't think we need to wait now. So I'd love to close it off by asking if you guys have any good anecdotes for the attendees and MSMEs to take back home.
Yeah, I think for me, sorry, Rene, I can
go ahead,
go first. So, I just wanted to be to say that, very simple. We just have one planet, so we don't have a spare planet. So if we don't take care of it, then that's it. So I think, to me, that is something that could be, that could resound to people. Sorry, Rene, for cutting you. Please, Rene.
Yes, I think it's the accountability is one which is difficult to define, and I think we need to count on everybody's responsibility and just make it clear that making the connection. And my understanding is that, or my experience, I would rather say that if you explain people on what is the relationship between their own behavior and the big things of climate change or the big things of plastic pollution and so on, then people are ready to make the changes. So it is often perceived that if you go to small businesses, they say, on climate change, I'm not contributing, and you have to explain to them, even your few tons of coal which you use every week is a contribution to climate change, and we can't solve it by just saying we need to look at the power stations or the big polluters. We all have to make equitable contributions, because zero emissions, zero carbon neutrality means that zero from everyone. And I guess that is something that are some conversations that need to be held, that there is basically no way to hide that everyone has to take responsibility, and consumers and governments also have to vote with their feet and basically also enforce it to a certain extent. I hope that's useful.
Yes, and I think this is also a good way to just close it off, that all of us, including the speakers and the panelists for this day and the next day 2, day 3, we're all contributing towards a circular economy. Nobody has completely created a full closed loop. And that's completely fine. I think what's important is this shared commitment towards circularity. And if we need to figure it out, we need to work together. And I think that's completely unprecedented compared to past decades and generations where people, or at least organizations, were just focusing on capitalism. Growth, 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 growth. We don't have to grow. We just need to sustain. We need to maintain. We need to attain what we call circular economy. And with that, hopefully you'll join us for the next day 2 and day 3 when we talk about food and the lifestyle track. There will be a lot of showcases from the international speakers and of course, local practices as well. And hopefully you can join us. But for now, I would like to give the floor back to Tony. And again, thank you, Teddy and Rene, and hope to see you guys real soon.
Thank you, pleasure.
Thank you.